The crystalline archives of the Galactic Historical Institute towered above senior archivist Cthulhu, their translucent walls reflecting the soft purple light of the twin moons. Her tentacles moved gracefully across the security console, entering the complex sequence that would grant her young visitors access to the restricted section. Behind her, 5 junior scholars from the Academy of Sinological Studies waited with barely contained excitement, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with anticipation. "What you're about to see," Cthulhu's voice resonated through her thoracic chamber, creating the formal harmonics of her people, "has been classified at the highest levels for the past 30 cycles. It is the unedited footage of humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council, and it will challenge everything you think you know about these remarkable beings." The youngest scholar, Zexri, their patterns glowing a brilliant azure with curiosity, spoke up. "But archivist, surely the official records." "The official records," Thera interrupted, her own patterns shifting to a deep indigo of amusement, "are what we chose to remember. This," she gestured with 3 of her tentacles at the enormous data crystal, now emerging from the archive walls, "is what actually happened." The crystal pulsed with stored information, and as Cthulhu interfaced with it, the air around them shimmered. The archive room disappeared, replaced by the commanding bridge of the Galactic Council's flagship, the Eternal Wisdom. The scholars found themselves standing as invisible observers in a moment of history that would reshape the galaxy. High Commander Varrock stood at the center of the bridge, his chidness armor gleaming under the ship's lights. Before him, on the main view screen, was the first human vessel ever encountered by the Council. It was small by their standards, almost primitive-looking, and clearly outgunned by the Council's battle fleet. "They call it the Vancouver," Varrock's voice echoed through the holographic recreation. "A simple exploration vessel that wandered into our space. The perfect opportunity to demonstrate the Council's power and bring another species under our protection." The scholars watched as Varrock transmitted the standard first contact package, a series of mathematical equations establishing basic communication, followed by the Council's terms for peaceful submission. The response they received would become legendary. Instead of the expected surrender or panic, the human ship transmitted back what appeared to be entertainment broadcasts. Thousands of them. Movies, television shows, music, literature, art. A massive cultural database that completely overwhelmed the Council's communication systems. "They're attacking our networks," one of Varrock's officers shouted, their patterns flaring with alarm. But another officer, younger and more curious, had already begun analyzing the data. "Sir, they're not attacking. They're sharing everything. Their art, their music, their stories, their failures, their triumphs. Their whole history." The humans had responded to a show of force with an act of radical openness, while the Council had expected fear or aggression. Humanity had chosen to reveal itself completely. Its wars and its peace, its cruelty and its kindness, its greatest achievements and its worst mistakes. The scholars watched in amazement as Varrock's patterns shifted from militant red to contemplative green. On the screen, the human captain appeared, a small, soft-looking being named Sarah Chen. She spoke simply but with unmistakable conviction. "We could pretend to be perfect," her translated words echoed through the hologram. "We could hide our flaws and present only our strengths, but that's not who we are. We are human, beautiful and terrible, wise and foolish, peaceful and violent. We offer you not submission, but truth. If you want to know us, know all of us." Thera paused the playback, her patterns rippling with emotion. The Council had encountered many species over the millennia. Some fought, some surrendered, some tried to deceive, but none had ever responded to a show of force with such honesty. "But why would they expose their weaknesses?" Zexri asked, their patterns showing confusion. "Because," Cthulhu replied, her patterns shifting to the deep gold of revelation, "they understood something that took the Council centuries to grasp. True strength lies not in appearing powerful, but in being unafraid of appearing weak. The humans knew that their imperfections, their contradictions, their very humanity was not a weakness to hide, but a strength to share. The hologram resumed, showing the aftermath. The Council's mighty fleet, built to intimidate and conquer, found itself instead hosting cultural exchanges. Alien officers watched human movies in stunned silence, listened to Earth music with growing fascination, and began to understand that they had encountered something unprecedented, a species that had turned vulnerability into an art form. This was the moment, Cthulhu continued, her patterns now a shifting rainbow of complex emotion, when the Council realized that their traditional methods of expansion and control were obsolete. The humans hadn't just survived first contact, they had transformed it. They showed us that true power lies not in forcing others to submit, but in having the courage to be known, fully and completely. The scholars watched as the hologram showed the signing of the first human council accord, not a treaty of submission, but a pact of mutual understanding. The humans had turned an attempted conquest into a cultural revolution, armed with nothing but the truth of who they were. Remember this, Cthulhu concluded, her pattern settling into the silver of wisdom. When you study humanity, they are not powerful despite their contradictions and imperfections. They are powerful because of them. They taught us that the greatest strength is not in hiding what you are, but in sharing it. As the hologram faded and the archive room reappeared, the young scholars stood in silence, their patterns shifting through colors of wonder and understanding. They had come expecting to learn about a military encounter, but instead had witnessed something far more profound. The moment when humanity taught the galaxy that the greatest victories come not from force of arms, but from force of truth. War Chief Krelax watched the holographic battle simulation with his 4 eyes narrowed to slits, his scaled skin darkening with frustration. Around him, the command center of the Drachnid flagship, Eternal Victory, hummed with nervous energy as his staff officers studied the same footage. "Impossible," he growled, mandibles clicking. "No ship can simply disappear, especially not in the Thorian Nebula. The radiation alone should make any cloaking technology useless." Yet the evidence floated before them. A human vessel, designated HMS Barracuda, had been systematically dismantling their supposedly impenetrable blockade of the nebula for the past 3 weeks. 15 supply ships escorted through, 7 Drachnid patrol vessels disabled, and not a single clear sensor reading of the ship responsible. "Play it again," Krelax ordered. "From the beginning." The hologram reset, showing the latest encounter. A Drachnid heavy cruiser, the Relentless, patrolling the nebula's edge. The first hint of trouble, a slight gravitational disturbance, dismissed as nebula turbulence. Then, suddenly, the cruiser's engines went dark. No explosion, no battle damage. Just darkness. "Impossible," Krelax repeated, but with less conviction. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vextra, stepped forward, her ceremonial armor gleaming under the command center's lights. "Sir, we've received a transmission from Central Intelligence. They found something interesting in the human historical archives, something about their pre-space naval warfare." Krelax turned all 4 eyes toward her. "Explain." "They had vessels called submarines that operated beneath their oceans, silent hunters that used the properties of water, pressure, temperature layers, salinity gradients, to hide and strike without warning." "We're not fighting in an ocean," Krelax snapped, but his color had shifted to the deep blue of intense thought. "No," Vextra agreed, "but the Thorian Nebula has similar properties. Density variations, radiation layers, magnetic eddies. What if they're not using traditional cloaking technology at all? What if they're using the nebula itself as camouflage, just as their submarines once used the ocean?" The war chief's scales rippled with sudden understanding. "Show me everything we have on these submarines." Hours later, Krelax stood before the assembled captains of his fleet, their faces projected on separate holographic panels around his command center. His color had shifted to the deep purple of respect mixed with concern. "We've been fighting this wrong," he announced. "We've been treating space like a void. But the humans, they see it differently. To them, space is an ocean, full of currents and layers we've been too blind to use." He gestured, and a new hologram appeared. Ancient footage of Earth's submarines at war. They learned these lessons centuries ago in their wet navies. How to move silently. How to use natural phenomena as cover. How to strike from seeming nothingness. "But surely our technology," one captain began. "Our technology," Krelax interrupted, "is based on detecting ships that want to be seen. The Barracuda doesn't announce itself with powerful engines or active sensors. It drifts with nebula currents, uses passive sensors only, masks its emissions signature by matching background radiation. It's not invisible. It's patient." A new alert flashed across the command screens. "Thinking about this wrong. We can't fix the quantum stabilizers, but maybe we don't have to. Maybe we just need to buy ourselves time." She began pulling up schematics of the station's massive cargo bays, her fingers flying over the holographic controls. "How many industrial-grade gyroscopes do we have in storage?" 37. Another engineer answered after checking. "Used for cargo handling in Zerog sections." "And the maintenance bots?" "The ones used for external hull repairs." 112 units, currently inactive due to the stabilizer failure. Maya's grin grew wider. "Perfect. And I'm betting we have plenty of steel cable in storage, right? The old-fashioned kind, not the monofilament stuff." Zixtel's confusion was now tinged with curiosity. "Yes, but what are you?" "We're going to build a giant Newton's cradle," Maya announced. "Well, more like a three-dimensional web of them, combined with synchronized gyroscopes. We'll turn the entire station into one massive mechanical stabilizer." The alien engineers stared at her as if she'd suggested solving their problem with magic. But Maya was already deep in calculations, her mind reaching back to basic physics, the kind humanity had relied on long before quantum technology had appeared. "Look," she explained, pulling up a simplified diagram. "The station's main problem isn't the lack of quantum fields, it's harmonic resonance. The structural stress is building up in predictable patterns. If we can counter those patterns with precisely timed mechanical forces." What followed was perhaps the strangest engineering project in the station's history. While the alien engineers handled the complex calculations needed to predict the stress patterns, Maya directed a small army of maintenance bots in an intricate dance of construction. They stripped the cargo bays of their gyroscopes, repositioned them at key structural points throughout the station. Miles of steel cable were strung through maintenance tunnels and across the hull, creating a complex web of mechanical force distribution. The maintenance bots themselves became part of the solution, their bodies reprogrammed to act as mobile counterweights, moving in precise patterns to counter the station's growing instability. It was ugly, inefficient, and would have made any quantum engineer cringe. But it was working. "This is insane," Zixtal observed 4 hours later, watching as the station's structural integrity readings slowly stabilized. "We're holding a bleeding-edge space station together with what amounts to strings and spinning tops." Maya laughed, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Quantum technology is amazing, but it made us forget something important. The basic laws of physics haven't changed. Force is still force, mass is still mass, and momentum is still momentum. We just needed to remember how to use them." The alien engineer's crystalline form pulsed with what Maya had learned to recognize as admiration. "Your species has a remarkable ability to find elegance in primitiveness. Any Arxian engineer would have considered this solution impossible, not because it wouldn't work, but because we would never have thought to try it." "That's because you've never had to fix a car with duct tape and wire coat hangers," Maya grinned. "Humans have a long, proud history of making things work with whatever we have on hand." Sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the best solution. Sometimes you need to think backward to move forward. When the relief ships arrived 3 days later, they found Nexus 7 still spinning peacefully in space, its hull wrapped in a spider web of cables, gyroscopes humming at key structural points, and a swarm of maintenance bots dancing their precisely calculated patterns through space. The quantum engineers who arrived to install the replacement stabilizers spent hours studying Maya's improvised system, their various sensory organs registering disbelief that such a primitive solution could have saved such an advanced structure. But Maya knew better. As she watched them work, she thought about all the times humanity's primitive solutions had saved the day. Sometimes, she reflected, the greatest innovation isn't in creating something new, but in remembering something old. The universe might run on quantum mechanics, but it was built on classical physics, and humanity had never forgotten how to speak that original language of creation. The atmosphere of Novus Prime was literally melting. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Wells of the Emergency Response Unit watched from her command post as another massive plasma storm rolled across the horizon, its violet-green tendrils reaching down to scorch the planet's surface. The colony's shield generators were failing, and they had less than 48 hours to evacuate 10 million colonists, both human and alien. Another supply convoy had slipped through their blockade. The captain's expressions darkened, but Kralax's scales shifted to an unexpected shade of appreciation. "Don't you see?" he said softly. "They're not just beating us. They're teaching us. Every encounter reveals more of their method. They're showing us that space isn't empty. It's alive with phenomena we've ignored, currents we've dismissed, hiding places we've never considered." He brought up a new tactical display, showing the nebula's complex layers of radiation, magnetic fields, and gravitational eddies. "They've turned our greatest advantage, our technological superiority, into a weakness. We rely on active sensors, powerful engines, brute force. They've adapted ancient ocean warfare techniques to space, using the natural phenomena we dismiss as background noise. So how do we fight them?" Vextra asked, her scales showing genuine curiosity rather than frustration. "We learn from them," Kralax replied. "We stop trying to dominate space and start trying to understand it. The humans haven't just developed new technology. They've developed a new way of thinking about space itself." He turned to face the assembled holograms of his officers. "Effective immediately, all ships will begin studying Earth's historical naval warfare techniques. We need to understand how they think, how they see space not as a void to be conquered, but as an ocean to be navigated." Later, alone in his quarters, Kralax reviewed the message that had been left aboard one of their disabled patrol ships. It was short, signed by the Barracuda's captain. "Space is not empty. It's full of life, energy, and movement, just like our oceans. When you learn to swim with these currents rather than fight them, you'll understand why we chose the name Barracuda. Until then, we'll be here, in the depths you haven't learned to see." His scales shifted to the gold of epiphany. The humans hadn't just brought their technology to space. They'd brought their perspective, their history, their understanding of how to move through hostile environments with grace rather than force. They weren't just fighting differently, they were thinking differently. And in doing so, they were changing how the galaxy itself thought about space warfare. Not as a contest of brute force and advanced technology, but as a dance with the very fabric of space itself. The Barracuda wasn't just a ship, it was a teacher, showing them a new way to see the cosmos. Kralax turned to his viewport, watching the swirling colors of the Thorian nebula with new eyes. Somewhere out there, silent and patient, the Barracuda was swimming through currents his people were only now learning to see. And despite himself, he felt his warrior's heart fill with anticipation for what other lessons humanity might have to teach them. Deep Space Station Nexus 7 was dying. Chief Engineer Maya Chen could feel it in the vibrations beneath her feet, the subtle wrongness in the station's rhythm that told her they had less than 6 hours before total structural failure. Around her, in the station's main engineering hub, a mixed team of alien engineers worked frantically at their stations, their various appendages flying over holographic controls. "The quantum stabilizers are completely dead," announced Zixtel, the Archean lead engineer, his crystalline form pulsing with distress patterns. "Without them, the station's artificial gravity will collapse, and the hull integrity will fail catastrophically." Maya finished, studying the complex three-dimensional diagnostic display floating before her, taking all 12,000 inhabitants with it. The problem was deceptively simple. A micrometeorite shower had damaged the station's quantum stabilizer array, technology so advanced that even the Archeans, who had designed it, needed specialized facilities to manufacture replacements. The nearest such facility was 3 days away at maximum speed. They had 6 hours. Maya watched the alien engineers working, noting how they focused entirely on the quantum systems, trying desperately to repair technology that was fundamentally unrepairable with their available resources. But something was nagging at her, a half-formed idea born from her grandfather's ancient workshop back on Earth. "What did we use before quantum stabilizers?" she asked suddenly. Zixtel's crystalline form flickered in confusion. "Before. The station requires quantum technology too." "No," Maya interrupted, pulling up the station's structural schematics. "What did we, humans, use before we had artificial gravity and quantum fields? How did we keep things stable?" "Primitive mechanical systems," Zixtel replied, his tone making it clear how irrelevant he found the question. "Gyroscopes, counterweights, basic inertial dampeners. But those could never handle the complex gravitational stresses of a station this size." Maya's eyes lit up. "Maybe not alone, no. But what if we're—" "Status report." She barked into her comm unit, ignoring the burning sensation in her muscles as she entered hour 30 of continuous operation. "Third wave of evacuees boarding now," came the response from Captain Rodriguez. "The Centaurian rescue teams are rotating out for their mandatory rest period. The Arcturians finished their shift an hour ago." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. Most spacefaring species required regular rest intervals, their biology unsuited for extended periods of high-stress activity. But humanity had evolved as persistence hunters, and right now that ancient adaptation was proving invaluable. "What about our teams?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Still going strong, Commander. Running on stims and synthetic adrenaline. But they're not stopping. Team 4 just cleared another subsurface shelter, found 300 Pexelathi children who'd taken refuge in the old mining tunnels." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Pexelathi were notoriously difficult to evacuate, their crystalline bodies practically invisible to standard scanners. But human rescue teams had learned to search the old-fashioned way, room by room, tunnel by tunnel, refusing to leave anyone behind. "Commander," a new voice cut in. "Dr. Xintal, the Arcturian chief medical officer. Your people have been active for over 30 hours. By all known medical science, they should be completely incapacitated." "Known medical science," Sarah replied, watching another rescue shuttle lift off through the roiling atmosphere, "never had to account for human stubbornness, Doctor. Or coffee. Lots and lots of coffee." The truth was more complex, of course. Humans weren't immune to fatigue. They were just exceptionally good at pushing through it. Millennia of evolution had optimized them for exactly this kind of sustained effort, and modern medical science had only enhanced that natural endurance. A massive tremor shook the command post, and new alarms blared across the monitoring stations. The shield generators were failing faster than predicted. They didn't have 48 hours anymore. They had maybe 36, and that was being optimistic. "All teams," Sarah broadcast across the emergency channels. "Shield collapse accelerating. New evac window is 36 hours. Acknowledge." The responses came in quickly, tired voices, strained voices, but determined voices. Not a single human team requested relief. Not a single rescuer asked for rest. They acknowledged the new timeline and pushed harder. Fascinating, Dr. Xintal observed, his sensor stalks waving in agitation. Your species appears to perform better under increased pressure. The more impossible the situation becomes, the more efficiently you operate. Sarah was about to respond when another alert caught her attention. One of the subsurface scanners had detected a massive pocket of survivors, at least 2,000 colonists trapped in an old atmospheric processing plant. The facility was deep, surrounded by unstable terrain, and directly in the path of the next plasma storm. The Arcturian doctor noticed the alert too. That facility is beyond reach. The structural integrity of the surrounding area is too compromised. Any rescue attempt would be suicide. Sarah was already moving. Team 7, report to Sector 12. We've got 2,000 lives to save, and about 4 hours before that plasma storm hits their position. Rodriguez, get me every piece of mining equipment we've got. We're going to dig them out. Commander, Dr. Xintal's voice took on the harmonics of extreme concern. Your people have been working for over 30 hours. The physical and mental strain is exactly what we evolved to handle. Doctor, Sarah interrupted, checking her environment suit's seals. Humans spent thousands of years chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We're very, very good at not stopping until we reach our goal. What followed was a masterclass in human endurance. For 4 straight hours, human rescue teams dug through unstable ground, fighting against time and physics. They worked in perfect coordination, their movements economical, their communication minimal but precise. Every time Dr. Xintal's instruments indicated they should be collapsing from exhaustion, they pushed harder. When they finally broke through to the processing plant, with less than 30 minutes to spare before the plasma storm hit, Sarah saw something in the alien doctor's sensor stalks that looked remarkably like awe. This is why you were chosen for emergency response, he said as they watched the last of the rescued colonists board the evacuation shuttles. Not because of your technology or your strength, but because you simply do not stop. Sarah managed a tired grin. There's an old Earth saying, Doctor. The most dangerous phrase in any language is we've always done it this way. Humans don't accept impossible situations. We just keep pushing until the impossible becomes possible. As the final hours of the evacuation ticked by, the alien rescue teams watched in amazement as their human counterparts continued working. When the last shuttle lifted off, just minutes before the shield generators finally failed, every single colonist was aboard. Not a single life lost. In the aftermath, as the human rescue teams finally allowed themselves to rest, Dr. Xintal made a formal recommendation to the Galactic Emergency Response Council. His report noted that while other species might be stronger, faster, or more technologically advanced, humanity possessed something equally valuable: the sheer, stubborn refusal to accept defeat, backed by biology specifically evolved for sustained effort. In crisis situations, he wrote, there are those who operate within the bounds of what they believe possible, and then there are humans who simply redefine what's possible through sheer persistence. They don't break physics, but they will absolutely bend it until it gives them what they want. Sarah read the report later, after sleeping for 20 straight hours. She thought about her teams, about the way they had pushed through exhaustion, pain, and the seemingly impossible. They hadn't done it because they were special or superhuman. They had done it because giving up simply wasn't in their nature. In the end, that was humanity's true superpower. Not that they couldn't be stopped, but that they would not stop themselves. Not when lives were on the line. Not when it mattered. Not ever. The Unity Station's observation deck offered a spectacular view of the gas giant Helios and its ring system, but Admiral Elena Santos wasn't here for the scenery. She stood before the assembled representatives of 20 different species, her dress uniform crisp despite the station's slightly higher than Earth standard gravity. Behind her, holographic displays showed training footage from the past year, the first ever mixed species combat unit in galactic history. 1 year ago, she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. Many of you said this was impossible, that different species could never truly fight as one unit, that our biological and psychological differences were too great to overcome, that we would be stronger remaining separate. She gestured to the displays, where footage showed human soldiers running alongside crystalline Archons, while silicon-based Drachnid warriors coordinated with energy form Zixisthi in complex battle maneuvers. You were wrong. Not because our differences don't exist. They absolutely do. You were wrong because you saw these differences as obstacles rather than opportunities. The holographic displays shifted to show a series of training exercises. In one, a human team was teaching Drachnid warriors about submarine-style stealth tactics in space. In another, Archean engineers were combining their quantum technology with human mechanical ingenuity to create hybrid systems that were more reliable than either approach alone. Humans didn't come to the stars with the most advanced technology, Elena continued. We didn't have the strongest bodies or the most sophisticated minds. What we brought was something else. Adaptability. The ability to look at different approaches and find ways to make them work together. She nodded to her aide, and the displays showed new footage, the unit's first actual combat operation. A pirate fleet had been attacking civilian shipping lanes, using advanced cloaking technology that made them nearly impossible to track. The response had been unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The pirates expected traditional military responses. Instead, they got human stealth tactics combined with Drachnid sensor arrays. They faced human endurance paired with Archean quantum engineering. When they tried to escape through an asteroid field, they found Zixisthi energy beings working in perfect coordination with human pilots. The footage showed the pirates surrender. Their fleet had been completely neutralized without a single casualty on either side. It was the kind of victory that would have been impossible for any single species to achieve alone. But the real breakthrough, Elena said, her voice softening, wasn't tactical. It was understanding. Humans learned patience from the Archeans. The Drachnid learned creativity from us. The Zixisthi discovered new ways to manifest their energy forms by studying human martial arts. We didn't just combine our strengths. We learned from each other's perspectives. She turned to face the massive viewport, where Helios' rings shimmered like a bridge across the stars. There's an old human saying, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's what we've created here. Not just a military unit, but a bridge between species. A way of showing that our differences don't divide us. They complete us. The displays showed more recent footage, off-duty moments where different species shared meals, exchanged stories, taught each other their ways. A human soldier learning Drachnid meditation techniques, an Archean engineer practicing human yoga, their crystalline form bending in ways they never knew they could. 1 year ago, we started this program to prove it could be done, that different species could fight as one. What we actually proved was something far more important, that we can be more together than we ever could be apart. She turned back to the assembled representatives, her expression serious but hopeful. The galaxy is vast, and there will always be threats to face, but they won't be faced by humans alone, or Archeans alone, or any single species. They'll be faced by all of us, working together, each bringing our unique strengths to bear. One of the Drachnid representatives raised a hand, their scales shifting to the color of curiosity. And what of the weaknesses each species brings? How do you account for those? Elena smiled. By understanding that what one species sees as a weakness, another might see as a strength. Humans lack the Archeans' natural armor, but that made us learn adaptability. The Drachnid need more rest than humans, but that taught us the value of perfect coordination in rotating teams. The Zixisthi can't maintain physical form for long periods, but that pushed us to develop new tactical approaches we'd never considered before. She gestured to the training footage still playing behind her. We don't succeed despite our differences. We succeed because of them. Every limitation became an opportunity to innovate. Every challenge became a chance to learn from each other. The chamber fell silent as the representatives watched the footage. They saw human determination combined with alien precision. They saw ancient human techniques merged with advanced alien technology. But most importantly, they saw something new emerging. A way of operating that wasn't human or alien, but a genuine synthesis of both. This program was called The Bridge for a reason. Alina concluded, not just because it bridges different species, but because it bridges different ways of thinking, different approaches to problems, different perspectives on the universe itself. And like any bridge, it doesn't just connect 2 points. It opens up entirely new destinations. As the presentation ended, Alina watched the representatives begin their discussions. She knew this was just the beginning. The Mixed Species Unit had proved more than just military effectiveness. It had proved that the future belonged not to any one species, but to all of them working together, each contributing their unique strengths to create something greater than any could achieve alone. Humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy hadn't been technology or military might. It had been the ability to adapt, to learn, to take different approaches and find ways to make them work together. They had become the bridge builders of the galaxy, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they understood something fundamental. True strength lies not in overcoming differences, but in embracing them.